So we were looking back at the Game Awards and sort of the history of the
Uh-oh.
show because we've got a fun story to talk about a little bit later on. But the
Yeah.
first show was in 2014. And
Yep.
before then, you talked about doing the Spike TV Video Game Awards. There was VGX, which we might need to have you back another time to talk about that one.
Talk about Cranky
Um,
Kong, the Cranky
the
Kong leak.
Cranky Kong scandal.
The
Oh my gosh.
scandal, yes, the drama. Talk about
There's a lot of
drama.
drama that year. Yes.
And
Yeah.
going from a show that was a part of Spike, like what was like the risk level of starting this up, of going from that sort of a safety net to something that was really all you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been doing Game Award shows for a long time. I started in 1994 when I was a little kid. I helped write a show called Cybermania '94, which was the first video game award show hosted by Leslie Nielsen, the late great Leslie Nielsen, and Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement. You can still find it on YouTube. But I worked on that as a kid, and then yeah, as you said, worked on Spike's award show for many years, and then also G4 had a show called G4ia. So I've been around them for many years, and most people knew me at the time for working on the Spike VGAs. I spent almost a decade working on that show, and then yeah, we did the VGX show in 2013 with Joel McHale and I hosting. That's the one where Reggie showed up, and we had a lot of drama around that.
Absolute classic.
Yes, Cranky Kong had, I think, leaked out of Europe or something like that, and Reggie was going to reveal him. But anyways, we got through that one. And yeah, in 2014, I realized that YouTube and Twitch were continuing to grow as a platform for live streaming. I learned a lot working on the Spike show, but it was very much a traditional television show. And with that came a lot of the challenges of making, a big budget television production, trying to appeal to the sort of mass audience. And I said, well, maybe there's an opportunity to do something just directly for the gaming audience and use YouTube and Twitch as a live stream platform. So yeah, in 2014, I kind of bet on myself and said, let me build something new. And I went around to all the game companies, including Nintendo and PlayStation and Xbox, and asked them to support me in building something, kind of a new award show. And that was really the birth of the Game Awards in 2014. I look back and I don't know how I had the courage and gall to just sort of say I was going to go out and do this. But I think it was a combination of being frustrated with where the sort of Spike show had evolved into, and this belief that there was sort of another opportunity now to not have to work through a television network. And look, it's back in the day when I was hosting TV shows. I have to remember a good 10, 15 years ago, people were amazed that you could see, full scale resolution video footage of games on television. And like the internet couldn't even provide that. So you're like, oh, let me tune into Spike because I can watch HD footage of a video game. And that was, just so ahead of its time. Whereas now, obviously, I mean, we broadcast the Game Awards in 4K on YouTube. It's higher quality than even you'd get on television. So yeah, it was just a combination of sort of the situation that we were in with the VGAs and this new opportunity of the internet and live streaming that just sort of came together. The confluence of all those things allowed me to go off and build this new thing in 2014. And I still remember going to Nintendo back then and talking to Reggie when I think he was on a scuba trip in Hawaii. And I remember calling him and pitching him the idea of the Game Awards and things like that. And he had a lot of tough questions for me, but yeah, he joined the advisory board and we made it happen. And it was a really great time because I was working with Nintendo as well on some of the directs and doing a lot of other things as well at that time. So it was a special couple of years to get to work on the birth of the Game Awards. And then obviously, the next year was when Mr. Iwata passed away. So there was a lot going on inside of Nintendo at that point. But I'm forever grateful that I got to start it when I did.
Well, since you mentioned it, why don't we take a closer look at the 2014 show, and we specifically want to talk about Koji Kondo's involvement and the performances that he did, specifically the one with Imagine Dragons. I have to imagine that ranks pretty high up there in terms of all the musical performances you've had.
Oh yeah, again, as I said, it's crazy that was like our first year, and we kind of didn't know what we were doing really. I mean, that show in 2014. I think we made it in about 6 weeks. Like I spent most of my summer trying to convince everyone that I wanted to do this show. I had to, figure out, could I raise the money? How could I do it? We didn't have enough money really to make the show. And we did it at the Britney Spears Theater in Las Vegas at the Axis. And the only reason we could do it is because Britney was kind enough to basically lend her stage set to us for the show. So if you look back at that show, all the screens and the lights are exactly the same as, I think it was called Pieces of Me, which was her Vegas show. We basically just took the fire ring out, and the rest of the show is basically her set that she lent to us because we didn't have enough money to kind of build a stage like we do now. So yeah, it all came together extremely quickly, and that Imagine Dragons moment, that came together in, I think, the final like 2 or 3 days before the show. And Kit, I know you were very involved in that too. And I'd reached out, to Nintendo to talk about Koji Kondo being involved and doing something musical kind of at the show. And he was so kind to agree to come over to the show and be a part of it. And we had, I think, originally really talked about him opening the show with the Super Mario Brothers theme, kind of with him on a piano. And that was kind of a big idea. And I think we hoped we were going to do something with Zelda. Though we really didn't know what was happening, even Mr. Miyamoto and Mr. Aonuma. I think it was like Thanksgiving weekend, we finally figured out, though, they're probably going to have something for us. And originally they had kind of said, well, we showed some stuff at E3, and we're probably just going to be able to show maybe just a little bit more than that. It was very unclear. And then we got this, it was like a 5-minute video of them sitting there playing the game, which was like incredible. And I think everyone at Nintendo and I was blown away. I just couldn't believe it. And then, yeah, we had the idea of doing something musical with Mr. Kondo potentially playing a Zelda theme. And then I think at some point I came up with the idea of a collaboration with Imagine Dragons and thought about it, and reached out to the band, and they were in Vegas, which is their hometown, which helped. And they were in a house recording their next album. And initially, I think they were really busy, and they're like, well, we're not sure, but maybe Dan, the lead singer, would be able to collaborate in some way. He's a huge fan of Mr. Kondo. And actually remembering now the emails, they were very skeptical about doing anything with the Game Awards. And the minute I mentioned Koji Kondo, they freaked out. They're like, wait, Koji Kondo? He might be involved? I said, yeah. And they instantly became way more interested in it. And then, yeah, we sort of started talking about, could there be a collaboration? What could it look like? Yeah, Kid, I remember you were out there, Mr. Kondo and Tim, and I think it was, you remember it was very last minute. I mean, it was like sort of the week of the show. We kind of didn't really know what was going to happen. There was sort of some talk about some type of collaboration, maybe on some Zelda music, or maybe collaborating on an Imagine Dragons song or something. And it really didn't take shape until you remember we were in that room. I still have a video of it somewhere, of them meeting. It was 2 or 3 days before the show. I think it was just going to be Dan at one point, and then when we were there, it kind of turned into the entire band getting involved with Mr. Kondo and doing something. And yeah, that performance to this day is such a high bar of, Mr. Kondo playing Zelda music and then turning into Imagine Dragons performing It's Time with Mr. Kondo. And I mean, you were part of that, Kid. I'm curious to get your perspective, but it was definitely, it was very last minute, but was so special. And I thought, like, really to me, what I loved about that moment is that I felt like Koji Kondo finally, hopefully, felt extra cool that day, because he was sort of like playing with this big band, and I think he really enjoyed it. And that's Nintendo's always about putting smiles on your face, and I feel like hopefully if we put a smile on Koji Kondo's face that day, that kind of made it all worth it.
Yeah, we got to meet him at the Zelda 25th anniversary concert a few years before. But one of the things when you start talking to developers is, like, you got to feel their comfort level of what they're okay doing. Yeah. And we got the sense that he was a pretty, calm and reserved guy. So we weren't sure, but he just ended up saying, like, yeah, I'll do it to anything that we kept throwing his way. So I actually wasn't surprised when he gave the thumbs up to Imagine Dragons, because he'd been given the thumbs up to everything. So it's like, all right, he's game for whatever. So that's great. I remember when we'd arrived in Vegas, it was like the day before, and in classic Japanese developer fashion, he hadn't really thought about it or prepped much. And he's like, I need the sheet music for this Imagine Dragons song. It's like, okay. And Krysta was there with us, and she somehow managed to track it down. And, he looks at this and he's like, this is no good. But he starts, like, writing the chords down on this piece of scratch paper, which
it was
I think
like a Post-it note.
You can see it in the video.
Yeah.
He's got it
Oh,
up
that's
on
right.
the
'Cause, yeah,
piano.
yeah, exactly. It's like a napkin almost or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were at like a little breakfast place and he's like writing it down on this napkin. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm getting a little bit worried about this now.
Yeah,
But
it was. I mean, yeah, I was so amazed that that came together, and I mean, yeah, you guys both remember it was a lot was happening because we had the Breath of the Wild footage reveal, and then we had this music thing. I mean, it was a massive segment. It was probably like 10 or 15 minutes of stuff. And yeah, I was. I mean, you were with him. It seemed like he was. Was he? He seemed excited, right?
Super.
yeah, he was having a great time. There was a really funny moment. So when we got to the Imagine Dragons house, there was just a lot of excitement of them meeting. You wanted to see what this performance would be like. This was their first time being together. And I remember he sat down at the piano and put his little piece of paper, and then he just sort of stared at the keys for like a minute. And I started to wonder what was going on. And he just waited so long that I was like, wait, does he not know how to play the piano? Has he been a fraud this whole time? What's going on? And he just looked so like he had a strange look on his face staring at the piano. But of course, finally, believe it or not, Koji Kondo does know how to play the piano. But that was just such a memorable start to that. And of course, it was great once they got going.
I remember when we met him at the Zelda anniversary, and he had gone up on stage to play the piano, and he kind of did like a similar thing where he paused for a moment and then started playing the piano. And I chalked it up to like he's on stage, he might be nervous, whatever. And then afterwards, I remember talking to him. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it was amazing to hear you play the piano live. Does it make you nervous to be on stage?" And he was like, "Oh no, I was much more nervous like speaking." Once I sat down on the piano, I was like, this is my zone. I'm comfortable here. And I just thought that was so funny that for the Imagine Dragons one, he was just like, maybe he was just like mentally like getting himself prepared or something. Like that's his like,
maybe this
piano.
is just his routine.
His
I don't
routine,
know.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
No,
his like piano routine.
As you said, he obviously never met the band before. I mean, yeah, we went to this house that was, I remember, he said off the Vegas
Out in the suburbs. Yeah.
Week of the show, and they were sort of there, and it was they'd never talked to each other before. We didn't really know what was going to happen, and again, like it really was only going to be Dan, the lead singer, and him. I think at that first point we're going to maybe do something together, and then I think they realized it's like, oh, the whole band. At one point, I think it was maybe going to be Koji Kondo on the piano, just playing It's Time with Dan or something, and it eventually evolved into what it needed to be, which was the full band there. But yeah, they were just sitting around working on their new album at the time. And yeah, it's such a great example of a magic moment like that coming together and how that happens in the final days leading into the show. And I always say with my show, there's so much pressure that comes down the final weeks because that's where everything happens. A certain celebrity guest will be there or not, or we think we're getting a world premiere that then cancels or something new shows up. And that's kind of the exciting but also nerve-wracking part of the show is that everything comes down to the final few days. And I remember, leaving the show and getting on probably my BlackBerry at the time and telling our team, it's like, okay, we got to, the full band is in and Koji Kondo are doing this. And yeah, it's amazing how well that came together the first year. And look, now we're so honored that the show is as big as it is. But yeah, back then it was really nothing. I think we had like 1 million live streams and we were celebrating that. And, to have the support from Nintendo and to have, the talent that came out to the show and the industry that supported us. I look back and I'm just like amazed it came together the way it did, because it didn't have to work out that way. But yeah, that's still very much a high bar. And then last year, we had Imagine Dragons come back again to do the song Enemy from Arcane, and they collaborated with Supergiant Games, which was an amazing moment with Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett. So they're, out of all the bands we work with, they are by far the most collaborative and open to ideas. And I still have somewhere, I think I made a mock-up of, it was really my idea to do, like, let's do It's Time with Koji Kondo. And same thing last year, it was kind of this idea I pitched in of them collaborating with Supergiant. And they were just always open to ideas and super collaborative. So yeah, they're an amazing guys, big gamers. And it really started with, a love of Koji Kondo. And I don't think they would have played our show if it wasn't for Koji Kondo. So it was a great moment for all of us, I think, to realize how revered Mr. Kondo is, rightfully so, amongst, popular musicians and things like that. And, he's most of the time is in Kyoto doing his thing. And he's not running around concerts and meeting bands and things like that. I mean, probably lives a somewhat isolated life there. in Kyoto, and so it was so nice to see that other musicians and acts respect him as they should, and yeah, I look back with that video and really smile to see the excitement around that. It's just such a beautiful performance too.